Windows Server 2022 is released in 4 editions. We have the Essentials. This is for small businesses, up to 25 users and 50 devices. If you have more than that number of users or devices, or you believe you will in the near future, this is not the edition you would actually choose. So just intended truly for small business environments. Windows Server Standard is for physical deployments and minimally virtualized environments. Windows Server 2022 Data Center is for highly virtualized environments. Now, one of the advantages to this, it includes unlimited virtual licenses. So when I want to run virtual machines, I don't have to go back to Microsoft and specifically buy virtual licenses. The standard includes 2 virtual licenses. Now there's a catch to that though. The 2 virtual licenses that are included, they require you to not use the operating system for anything other than hosting a virtual machine. If you do anything else with the operating system, like you decide, I want the physical server to be a file server and I want to create virtual machines, then one of your virtual licenses will be considered consumed. If you make the host a physical server, then you have 1 virtual license remaining. So that 2 virtual licenses, the caveat is the host operating system does nothing other than host virtual machines. If it does anything beyond that, then you have 1 virtual license. So there's a little caveat whenever you see that 2 virtual licenses referenced. We also have Windows Server 2022 Azure Edition. This is just the ability to run the server operating system as a virtual machine in Azure. Now, we have long had this ability. You could have ran a server 2012, 2012 R2. You can still run a 2016, 2019, and server 2022 virtual machine in Azure. So this is not a new capability for us at all, but they just consider that to be the Azure Edition if you deploy that in Azure, which is something that we will do in this course. A few more facts that we want to add. As we just said, you have unlimited virtual licenses for the Data Center Edition. You have 2 of those licenses with the Standard Edition. But where it gets interesting, the Data Center cost 7 times as much as the Standard Edition. So if you want to deploy just a handful of virtual machines, financially, it actually makes sense to deploy Standard if you will deploy 13 or fewer virtual machines. Now, if you're thinking you're not that familiar with virtual machines, do not be concerned. That is something we cover in great detail in the course itself. But a virtual machine is just going to your physical server and you are creating this virtual machine and you install an operating system on it and it acts like an independent operating system. So you could do that over and over and over. So I could have 1 physical server host 20 virtual machines, and you have 20 completely different operating systems your users can connect to access various resources, but they reside on a single piece of hardware. Now, later on, we do cover that and how to make that fault tolerant and all the considerations that go into that. But that's just what a virtual machine is. If I'm going to run 13 or fewer virtual machines, it's cheaper to buy the virtual licenses than it is to go spend 7 times the cost and purchase a data center server overall. So just something to consider when you're planning this out. Now, in most environments, you're going to have a mix of these editions. In my graphic here, my headquarters is in Mumbai. I have my physical data center there. I'm likely going to deploy Data Center Edition because I'm going to typically have a lot of virtual machines that run. So we pay that 7 times the cost for data center, get our unlimited virtual licenses. I also have branch offices in other locations here. So with my branch offices, I have one in Kuala Lumpur. With this, I only have maybe a small number of users in that location. So I deploy Standard Edition. Now, we said you get your 2 virtual licenses or 1 if your host provides any other capability. Well, in this scenario, I may decide I want to run maybe 3 or 4 virtual machines. Financially, it makes sense for you to actually go purchase virtual licenses and host those additional VMs here. Would be less expensive than you deploying a data center edition. If I also have a branch office in Sydney, if I have a need to deploy a file server as a physical server, standard edition would be great for that. So typically, you're going to see data center as the host of lots of virtual machines, and your other operating systems, maybe that are not virtual machines in your environment, or they run a small number of virtual machines, will likely be standard edition. So it is a mix and match overall. There is one addition that you may be familiar with from older operating systems that has been removed in Server 2022. The Hyper-V edition is no longer supported. Hyper-V is Microsoft's virtualization platform, so you use that to create virtual machines. Microsoft had a dedicated edition, this Hyper-V Server edition. They've now announced that 2019 is the last version, and 2019, that Hyper-V edition, will be supported until its life cycle ends in January of 2029. Now, the way this worked, you would have your hardware. You would go to the Microsoft website and you would download, I'm just going to say HV. You would download this Hyper-V edition. That is completely free, but it included no virtual licenses. Now, Microsoft says it's free. I always say it's more like pay me later instead of paying me now. Because before you deploy virtual machines, you do need to go purchase these virtual licenses. So there is a cost associated with this. But the operating system itself, the hypervisor you download, that was a completely free download from the Microsoft Evaluation Center. Some of the characteristics of this Hyper-V edition, it had no graphical user interface. So locally, it's a command line only, and you could do nothing else with it. It could only run virtual machines. So no additional roles, features. So you could not make this a file server, web server, anything like that. The only thing it would do is host virtual machines, so you could run those directly on it. A concern in all environments is end-of-life support. So when we have an operating system, we know at some point you have to upgrade, migrate to the newest operating system. That's always going to be a requirement at some point. So when do we have to do that is always a concern. The oldest operating system that Microsoft still supports on the server side is Windows Server 2012 R2. This was released in November 13. The mainstream end date has already reached end of servicing, but we have this extended end date of October 10th, 2023. What these terms mean for us, mainstream and extended end date, they refer to the support lifecycle for each new version of Windows. Mainstream support will last for 5 years after the edition is released, and you get non-security hotfixes, you get new features, and naturally you get security updates and all those things as well. The extended support lasts for another 5 years. So that's once your mainstream ends, you move to extended. So that's really years 6 through 10. With that, you will get security and reliability patches in that extended end date. After that extended end date, your version of Windows will no longer be supported by Microsoft, and you're not getting any updates, patches. However, Microsoft continuously modifies this. They have announced that for Server 2012 R2, they will extend security updates through October 13th, 2026. So you're still going to get all your security patches if you keep that 2012 R2 in your environment. And this works the same for other products. 2016 has already reached mainstream end of servicing. Jan 2027 is the extended end date. Now, at some point, Microsoft will come out and likely say, we will extend security updates for Server 2016 through a certain date. They've not said that yet because that's several years off before the extended end date even approaches. January 2029 for server 2019, 2024, January 2024 for the mainstream, and server 2022, October 26, and extended to October 2031 is the way it stands right now. So pretty interesting overall how those actually work, and helps you determine when you need to start planning upgrades.